Our coverage begins with the cherry news that after about 12 hours of total blackout across the country, public power supply has now been restored. Minister of Power Adebayo Adelabu earlier in the day announced the reason for the total blackout experienced in the country on Thursday. The collapse of the national grid was caused by a fire outbreak at a section of the Kainji Jebba power station. The grid came down totally around 12:40 a.m., cutting off supply to power distributors nationwide. According to the minister, the fire, which came with an explosion sound, affected the installations and led to a sharp drop in power generation. As at the time of the minister's revelation, the fire has been fully arrested and power restored. The frequency of the collapse of the national grid has left many concerned. Within the lifespan of the previous administration, Nigeria spent over 1.5 trillion naira in bailing out the power sector. Within the same period, the country witnessed the collapse of the national grid 98 good times. This is a worrying situation that requires urgent attention. To help us make better sense of this, we're being joined by the Executive Coordinator, NEPA Wahala NG, Emeka Ojoko. Emeka, thank you for giving us your time. In 8 years, the national grid has collapsed 98 times, and with this came unquantifiable losses in diverse areas. What do you think is responsible for the high frequency of the collapse of our grid?
It's basically because of dilapidated infrastructure. Most of the equipment that is installed in our national grid are old, and they really cannot sustain our current generation capacity. So from time to time, what the government is working on upgrading most of its equipment, installing new infrastructure, and trying to keep them in balance. But when you have to balance out the old and the new, you'd expect that this kind of happen, right? These kind of things will happen. So it's old infrastructure. That's what's causing what we've been seeing for the past 17 years or so, the past 7 years.
From the time of the privatization of the power sector was completed in 2014, the country has spent about 1.6 trillion naira in bailing out the sector. And right now, the generation capacity of the sector is less than 6,000 megawatts. For a population of over 200 million people and widely spreading urbanization, there seems to be a problem here. What do you think is going on?
Well, we don't have value for money spent. The amount of money spent on the power sector since the Obasanjo administration is huge. Compared to the value for that money is insignificant. Corruption is too widespread in the public sector, and that's what's responsible for what we are seeing. $16 billion, and we are still where we are. It's ridiculous. And the only explanation of that is that this money has gone into people's pockets. Privatization was botched. We are seeing the signs now with the banks coming in to take over some of the discos because they cannot pay off facilities that they took to buy their controlling their interest in these companies at the time of privatization. So it was botched as far as I'm concerned. And you've seen some revelations that have been that the EFC has brought out in recent times. People have been arrested for projects that were done, were projects that were paid for but not executed within this time frame. It is a Nigerian factor, basically, that we're looking at here, right?
Well, quite unfortunate, really. Of recent, the president, our very new president, Tinubu, has given the go-ahead to states to begin the generation of electricity, if they can. But there is a concern that as long as distribution of electricity is centralized through the national grid, the situation may not change significantly. It may become like the people will say in the local parlance, money they walk, baboon they chop. What do you think?
It will take a while, right? It will take a while. If the various stakeholders make the right moves now, maybe in about 5 years, we can start seeing the effects of the adjustment to the laws that we have made to allow states generate and then distribute electricity. It will take a while. Okay, with the central structure that we have now, even if any state wants to getting generation, transmission, distribution. It's just the national grid. So they'll be forced to deal with existing structures, even if they're able to start having generation capacity. Okay, so before they can build up those things that can enable them to have traction, at least 5 years before we can start seeing the effects of the current legislation on the subject matter.
But some would say Nigeria is a patient country. Hopefully it will happen sooner. Thank you very much for speaking with us. We appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank you for having me.